Now that he would face now that he would face
Okay guys, good evening to everyone, and good morning to anyone who's watching this in the morning. And welcome to, once again, to my digital art adventure, where I'm going to draw my concept art while listening to some light novel. And right now we're reading the story of what's it called again? Okay. The dead mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So this will be the chapter 2 of the story.
Chapter 2.
So yeah, chapter 2. Okay guys. So this will be we'll be starting the design again from what we left off last time. I did a sketch here. I put some guides for the perspective, and so far I think it's pretty much good for the perspective, but I'm not very sure because I really don't know how to see perspective really properly. But from the pictures and photos that I've been looking up for a while right now, I think it's pretty much balanced compared to the ones I did back then. So I think this is good. For the character, I'm thinking of changing the pose or something, but I want to try finish the sketch first before I move on and try a different pose if I want to. I'll see after I finish sketching this. Oh yeah, by the way guys, before I start, once again, this is your boy Shrimp, the ProDigal Shrimp, and thank you for watching this video if you're watching this. and hope you will leave a like and subscribe if you want to, so you can see more of my drawing and probably some more videos I'm going to post. Later tonight, probably I'll post something for my video for Monster Hunter Rise. Okay. So anyway, this concept art I'm going to do right now, it's let me get rid of the music, it's kind of distracting. So for the concept art that I'm doing right now, for those who want to know or haven't know yet, this is a design for my a desktop design for Monster Hunter Rise for my character. Yeah, so I have this character that I copied for a design from Gura, the VTuber, and then I used her model as my inspiration to making an avatar. Let me show you. Yeah, so this is my avatar in Monster Hunter Rise, and I'm going to draw her right now in this concept art, and I'm gonna use this as my desktop background afterwards, and also some thumbnails. Yeah, I think I'll make a thumbnail out of this after I finish this. Depends if I think it's good enough. But yeah, so far I won't talk too much anymore, and let's proceed for this art, and I'll play the audiobook for the light novel of the dead mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So let's hear this audiobook and see my designing. Okay guys, bye.
Hard mode begins, insanity takes over. Even when Vandali opened his eyes the next morning, there was no sign of Darsa. This is strange, I have a bad feeling about this. Maybe I should go out to find her. Normally, it would be reckless for a 6-month-old infant to go outside by himself, but if Darsa didn't come back by the end of the day, Vandali would have to venture outside either way. There was still the one rabbit that Darsa had caught alive, but its blood would only last him until the end of today. He would have to make food suitable for an infant to eat by himself, but he was still only 6 months old. His stomach found it difficult to cope with food other than blood and his mother's milk. Infants eat a lot more than you'd expect. I need to eat 5 or 6 times a day, since I'm doing magic practice and physical exercises, so my energy expenditure is quite high. Because of this, Vandali needed to eat considerably more than a normal infant. If he simply stayed here like the infant that he was, it was possible that he would starve to death in a few days' time. Because he was a damp rather than a human, he wasn't sure how long it would take for that to happen. Well, I guess I'll start getting ready. Though he wanted to go out to find Darsa, his body was still unable to walk, let alone run, so he had to make various preparations. First, he had to secure a method of moving around. The first thing to do is get up. As Vandali gave this command in his head, the rabbit that he had killed by consuming its blood twitched and began to move. He had not granted it life. He had used his magic to have the various spirits floating around nearby to possess the rabbit's corpse, turning it into an undead. It was a death attribute spell that created undead. Looks like it worked. I wasn't sure if I could do it or not, since my skill is still only level 2, but it seems it works fine if I use a bit more mana to compensate. I guess it's because my skill level is low, I can only make a moving corpse. But I can still use it to move around. The rabbit didn't have any of the agility that it had when it was still alive, it simply moved. In origin, he had planned to use this spell to escape. But he could only create these weak servants and they would be of no use against the strict security that he had been under, so he had given up. The amount of mana that he had needed to create this single undead rabbit was far greater than the amount he needed for spells like sterilization and bug killer. When Vandali checked his status, he found that his mana had decreased by 10,000. Using sterilization once only cost him a single point of mana, so the mana cost of 10,000 was enormous in comparison. But one rabbit isn't enough. More of you, get up. You and you, get up. You as well, hurry and get up. The ivy that Darsa had used instead of rope began to crawl around like a snake. The small knife that she had used for cooking began lightly floating in the air. The shabby bed made of wood rattled as it began to shake. Vandali could have spirits possess more than just corpses. He could make them possess inorganic substances such as ivy, wood and metal. The idea came from fantasy and occult works that he had seen on Earth, evil spirits that possessed weapons to move on their own without a bearer, cursed gems or vases and poltergeists that caused furniture to move on its own. However, having spirits possess inorganic substances required several times more mana than having them possess a corpse. I used nearly 1 million mana just now. My head hurts a little. I'll leave after I replenish myself. Vandali sucked the blood from the last remaining rabbit to replenish his mana, turned that into an undead as well, and then left his home, riding on the bed. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Which way is the town? Where can I find somewhere with lots of people? The bones of a deer, a mummified bear, a wild boar missing its head and internal organs, and a human's corpse that for some reason only had a skeleton remaining. These servants carried Vandali's bed as he continued onward. If anyone other than an adventurer or soldier were to witness this sight, they would surely tremble with fear. An infant with silver hair and odd-colored eyes, one deep crimson and the other a bluish-purple, leading an army of undead. A terrifying sight indeed. But he looked more fiercer than he actually was. The undead corpses and bones of animals. The tools and furniture that had been cursed to be made undead, any one of these could be repelled by a single farmer wielding a hoe, and any adventurer would only consider them a group of small fry. Knowing this, Vandali continued increasing the number of undead at his command as he hurried forward. Mom isn't in this forest. He had commanded a winged insect fly around to search the forest, but there was no sign of Darsa. He asked the spirits that were floating amongst the trees, but they couldn't give him the information he wanted. His head felt hot, as if it was steaming, and he felt a dizziness that would not subside. He no longer knew how many millions of mana he had spent. But he couldn't shake off this bad feeling. I should have tested making undead earlier. I should have had an undead follow Mom around. If he had done that, he would know where she was. If something happened, he would be able to sense it straight away. In fact, if Darsa had known that he was capable of doing these things, she might have decided to leave the forest on the journey for her birthplace earlier. But he didn't test it. He had lived in peace, thinking that he would test it the next time his skill level increased. He had been spoiled by Darsa, his mother. Faster, to the town. He had around 50 million mana remaining. By the time his group of undead reached Ivbijia, the town closest to the forest, night had already fallen. Ivbijia was a small town built in between two villages, with a population of around 2,000. It was governed by Estero, the Baronet. It was surrounded by a wall to ward off monsters, and there was no way to enter except through the 4 gates to the north, south, east and west. Unless one could fly through the air. You guys wait here. Bone Monkey, you carry me. He grabbed onto the back of an undead he had made from the skeleton of a large monkey he had found in the forest, whom he had named Bone Monkey, and quietly approached the town's outer wall. It was a town with a population of only 2,000, so it wasn't at particular risk of monster or enemy nation attack. Vandali could see holes in their guard system. If the person in charge of the security at a military facility in Origin could see this, he might feel sorry for these people. Even so, the gates were closed and guards stood watch after nightfall. There would be chaos if a human-sized skeleton monster approached them. That's why Vandali ignored the gates and headed for the walls. And then he embedded some mana and a suitable number of spirits into the stone wall. Make a hole big enough for us to pass through. The portion of the outer wall, now an undead wall, wouldn't disobey its master's command. Making small, grinding noises, it changed shape to create a hole to allow passage through. 49 million mana remained. The death attribute magic skill has leveled up. He was barely aware of this announcement inside his head. His dizziness was very severe now. His head felt as if there was a hammer continuously striking his temple. Bone Monkey, find an alleyway where there's no sign of any people. Bone Monkey continued forward, his bones rattling as they moved against each other. His movements were unrefined and show no sign of consideration for Vandali, who was clinging to his back, but it wasn't a problem. Vandali wasn't able to walk on his own yet, but his arm strength already exceeded that of a grown man. Holding on to Bone Monkey with both hands, he could easily support his own body weight of less than 10 kilograms. He looked around the dark, almost lightless town. Thanks to his dark vision, he could see as clearly as if it were in the middle of the afternoon. Find Mom. Sending out the undead bugs to gather information, he listens to information from the spirits floating around the city that are conscious. Normal spirits that hadn't been turned into undead normally dissipated quickly after death unless they had an exceptional force of will. That was why Vandali thought there wouldn't be very many of them. She's in the town square. Bugs. Therefore, he was so surprised that his heart almost stopped when he heard this answer given to him. To the town square. Vandali, bones rattling again, Bone Monkey moved quickly. And in the town square, Vandali saw Darsa. She was there. Vandali, I'm sorry Darsa, as a spirit that looked as if it would vanish at any moment. Mom. Vandali, I'm sorry. Mummy died. But I didn't say anything about you, Vandali. Darsa, what happened? Vandali, Darsa's spirit, covered in countless whip marks, began her explanation. She had come to here, to Ivbijia, to gather information to prepare for the journey to the Dark Elf village, where the murder of even a damp would not be allowed. After all, Vandali, you have one eye the same crimson color as your daddy's, and one bluish-purple like your mommy's. People would know that you're a damp with one look at your face. Darsa, that's why using the highway wasn't an option. So there was a need to find a relatively safe alternate road where monsters wouldn't appear. But she had been betrayed. The Church of the God Elder knew her name and appearance, and one of their members reported that there was a female adventurer who sometimes came to the town, matching her description exactly. Darsa had unsuspectingly entered the town only to be surrounded by hired adventurers and ambushed by the knights of Baronet Bestero and the monks of the church. She had resisted, but eventually captured. I fought desperately, but there were adventurers that were even better with a bow and spiritual magic than me, so it was hopeless. After that, they whipped me, asking me, "Where is the damn prince you birthed, you damn witch?" Darsa. The church had tortured Darsa severely. They had whipped her, broken her fingers and pressed hot irons into her. The pain must have reached all the way into her soul. Even after becoming a spirit, the scars of the torture remain visible on Darsa's body. Even so, I kept quiet. I'm amazing, aren't I? I did well, didn't I? But the church realized that torturing me was useless, so they burned me at the stake earlier this evening. Darsa, in order to spread the news of their achievement, the news that they were ending the life of the woman who had succumbed to a vampire's seduction, they had executed Darsa publicly. So I was burned alive. After that, I wanted to at least go to see you after becoming a ghost, but the church's high priest Gordon sprinkled holy water over my ashes. Because of that, I could barely keep myself from disappearing, so I couldn't come to see you. Darsa, as Vandali listened to Darsa's words, his vision blurred and he felt a sense of despair and powerlessness, as if his body were rotting away. If he had left to look for her yesterday, he would have made it in time. If he had come here sooner, he would have made it in time. While he had been carefree, doing nothing, they were whipping his mother's beautiful, chocolate-colored skin. While he had been satisfying his stomach with the blood of the rabbit, hot irons were being pressed into her. And while he had been awkwardly wandering about the forest, she was burned alive in public as a criminal. All that remained of her now was a small pile of ash on the stone pavement of the town square. You have acquired the mental corruption skill. If I had grown up faster, if I had trained myself in using magic earlier, if I had taken the time to gather information beforehand, if I had become stronger, Mom wouldn't have had to die. Vandali, maddening emotions swirled around Vandali's mind. His expression didn't change much, but his body was shaking in grief and tears of regret and anger flowed endlessly from his eyes. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 2. Darsa watched him sadly. In truth, she had not wanted to tell him about the horrible things she had endured before her death. But she hadn't been able to stay silent about it. As a weak spirit on the verge of being extinguished, it was impossible for her to go against the wishes of Vandali, a death attribute mage with an enormous amount of mana. And in front of her eyes, Vandali's undead insects returned to him. They had brought back information about Darsa from all over Rivvigia. My lord, today's public execution was exciting, was it not? Steward, indeed. Even if we did not catch the vampire itself, catching the dark elf who opened her legs to him is still a satisfactory achievement. My reputation with His Majesty and the Church grows better, and the day of my appointment to a higher position draws near. Feudal Lord, the day you can receive the characters of correspondence from Baronet Bestero-sama is also near. Steward, a feudal lord and his steward were happily envisioning a bright future for themselves while enjoying their dinner. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 3. That damn witch, she didn't say anything about the damn prin in the end. Feudal Lord, I suppose she was trying to show her motherly love. She should have at least pleaded for her life when we burned her at the stake. She did not show any signs of repentance, right up until the end. She was truly a witch. Steward, she is surely burning in the flames of hell now. So from tomorrow, we will be hunting the damp using the 5 colored blades. Feudal Lord, would it not be fine to leave the infant? It has already been 3 days since the baby who still requires his mother's milk has been separated from her. I am sure it is dead by now. Steward, do not be so complacent. Even if it is a baby, half of its blood is that of a vampire. We do not know what kind of powers it may have inherited. If his father had been of lower breed it would be another matter, but if he was a noble or a pure breed, what would happen if you left him? Feudal Lord, my apologies, High Priest Gordon. Steward, but we do not have the funds to hire the 5 colored blades for long, and it would be unwise to add any more to our current achievements. I am sure that they are also not planning to associate themselves with us for much longer. They are adventurers, after all, different from us apostles of the god of law and fate, Alder. Have Ebvigia's hunters guide them on the hunt in the mountains and work together with the Baronet Donor's knights. Gordon, yes, sir. Steward, in the church, the high priest and holy knights were calling Darsa a witch and cursing her while discussing how to dispose of Vandali. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 4. Today's work was quite simple, That dark elf was decently skilled with a bow and spiritual magic, but I'd say she was a D class at most. She didn't stand a chance against us. Isn't that right, Blue Flamed Sword? What's wrong, Hines? You're acting a bit strange. No, it's nothing. I just have a really bad aftertaste about it. Hines, you feel sorry for that dark elf? You're the leader of us B-class adventurers, the 5 colored blades. Don't be going saying naive stuff like that. I don't know whether she succumbed to the vampire's seduction or wanted to become immortal, but that dark elf was paying for her own mistakes. It's nothing to be concerned about. Female adventurer. That's true, but I was shown a letter of introduction from the Earl. I suppose it couldn't be helped. Hines. Well, let's use the gold we earned to get some drinks and food. It's just like eating the meat of the monsters we defeated, you know? That's how we can honor her memory. The adventurer group who had been hired to catch Darsa, their 5 colored blades, were saying that they would use the gold they earned from killing her to treat themselves to a meal. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 5. Cheers. A toast to the Baronet Sama and High Priest Sama. Ha ha ha, a toast to Orby's moodiness as well. Oi, who are you calling moody? Orby, you, of course, you right here. I'm proud to have a companion who would fall in love at first sight with a beautiful dark elf coming to the town and then follow her like a hunter after being rejected. What? It's because of that we figured out that she was the witch on the wanted poster. Orby, it was really a waste, though, huh? Burning a beauty like that at the stake. And now we'll be earning some extra money by going on a hunt for the damp. The knights will probably be in command, but I'm sure we can get paid a bit for guiding them through. What are you talking about? We're going to be the ones to catch the damp. That way we'll be getting a big payout, not just a little bit. You didn't tell them where the dark elf's hiding place was. Good job, Orby. If we catch the damp, we can sell him to the church, the mage guild, slave merchants, wherever we like. The hunters who had betrayed Darsa were now laughing loudly as they planned to capture Vandali and sell him. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 6. If you don't behave, you're going to be burned at the stake like the witch. We can't find the damp, huh? I'm a bit anxious. They should hurry and exterminate him. Is there no chance the vampire will come back for revenge? It would be a big problem if our village's wine became known as the wine of the village the vampire came from. I wish this problem would be taken care of already. And finally, the words of the townspeople, the people who led very ordinary lives. None of them had any sympathy for Darsa. The level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 7. What a turn of events. In all of his 3 lifetimes, Vandali had not thought even once that the world revolved around him, or that it was full of goodwill. But he had never thought that it would be this cruel, this vicious. Earth, origin and finally Lander. This was his 3rd life, but he had not experienced happiness even once. Would he forever be forced to endure torturous feeling of having things taken from him? In every one of his lives he had done nothing wrong, but had irreplaceable things taken from him and received nothing in return. Even the god that he had discovered really existed had made no effort to help him. I'm sorry, Vandali Darsa. And then, right before Vandali's eyes, Darsa was about to be taken from him as well. It seems Mommy's at her limit now. Darsa's form, which was already faint to begin with, began to blur and her voice began to waver. Her spiritual form was reaching its limits on how long it could remain in this world. Wait. Mom, you can't go. Vandali, Darsa would be going to the afterlife, into the hands of that god of transmigration, Rodcorti. If he found out that Vandali had lost his mother on Lambda, he would surely be laughing. Rodcorti would laugh at Vandali, hoping that he would feel more despair, hoping that he would give up. Vandali did not want this, he couldn't allow it to happen, he couldn't bear it. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk to you like this a lot more. I wanted to see you grow big, turn into an adult. I wanted to see you find a wife, have children and become happy. Darsa, the level of the mental corruption skill has increased to level 8 to 9. I got it, Mom. Vandali had 45 million mana remaining. He poured all of it into Darsa's spirit. Vanda. Darsa, in the same way as when he created undead, he poured his mana into Darsa, whose fleeting spiritual form looked as if it could disappear at any moment. It was like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, but even with a hole, the bucket would be filled if a vast amount of water was poured into it. Next, I need a vessel that Mum can possess Vandali. He couldn't use a random stone, tool or bone. If he used something like that, it would be difficult for it to preserve Darsa's personality for long. If it were possible, her original body would have been best, but her body was now a pile of ash. Isn't there something I can use? Vandali, he had Bone Monkey searched the pile of ash and found one of Darsa's scorched bones. It was a fragment small enough to fit into Vandali's tiny hand. This will do. Mom, inside here. Vandali, Darsa, who was having an enormous amount of mana poured into her, tried to defy her son's request. This was for his sake? It was tragic, but she was already dead. Even if she was turned into an undead, it would be different from when she was alive. Being by her son's side in such a form wouldn't be of benefit to him. In fact, it would have a negative influence. That was why, even though she wanted to be by his side longer, she tried to separate herself from him as she fought back her tears. But you have acquired the death attribute charm skill. I want to be by his side, I want to be by his side, I want to be by his side, I want to be with him forever. I don't want to separate myself from this child. I understand. I'll be with you forever. Dasa's mind was filled with one thought, and she willingly inhabited her own remains. With this, I've recovered Mom, even though it's just her spirit. I'll create a new body for her one day. Vandali had gathered the mana needed to maintain Dasa's spirit form and a vessel for her to inhabit. But it was just a bone fragment, after all. But she couldn't move of her own will and could do nothing but sleep until Vandali decided to speak to her. That was why he definitely had to increase his skill with death attribute magic and create a vessel for her with which she could live a normal life, just as she had when she was alive. But before that, I have to get revenge on these guys. The baronet and his servants, the church, the adventurers, the hunters, the townspeople. Vandali would take revenge on all of them. He would never be satisfied until he did so. It made no sense that they would suffer no punishment whatsoever. It would be far too absurd. But right now I'm at my limit. He had less than a tenth of his mana left. His head was hurting, he was thirsty, hungry and sleepy. He had demanded too much from his 6-month-old body. I'm sorry, Mom. I'll avenge you later, Bone Monkey. Go back the way we came. Bone Monkey picked up Vandali in his arms and left Ivbigia, bones rattling as he walked. The outer wall that had opened a hole for Vandali and Bone Monkey to pass through returned back to normal, and the group of undead that had been waiting followed after Bone Monkey. The people were completely unaware that they had stirred the hatred of someone they shouldn't have. The level of the rapid healing skill has increased to level 2. The level of the surpass limits skill has increased to level 2. The level of the status effect resistance skill has increased to level 2. Name, Vandali, race, Damper, Dark Elf, age, 0.5 years old, title, none, job, ordinary person, level, 0, job history, none, attributes, vitality, 18, mana, 100,600,000, strength, 27, agility, 2, stamina, 33, intelligence, 25, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1, rapid healing, level 2, level up, death attribute magic, level 3, level up, status effect resistance, level 2, level up, magic resistance, level 1, dark vision, mental corruption, level 10, new, death attribute charm, level 1, level up, active skills, blood sucking, level 1, surpass limits, level 2, new. Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience points independently. Chapter 3, a Hikikomori at 6 months old. Struggling to stay con.
Okay guys, I think the form is pretty much all right. I think I'll just finalize the sketch for this one. I like the pose, I think. It might not be the best right now, but I think I can finalize correct it well later after sketching it properly. And also the background's pretty much good also. Yeah, simple, not too much not too much not too many eye-catching positions, and so yeah, I guess I'll start finalizing the sketch first, and then afterwards the background also. Okay, so far the story is getting really dark. So I really like the story after this arc of introduction. When the story gets at the point where he's starting to build up his power, his uh, his minions and stuff, it will get even more interesting. And yeah, it's sad that his mom died, and but nothing to worry about. He's a death mage, so he can still communicate with his mom, and there's a lot of opportunity in the future for him, probably, to reunite with her once more in flesh. Depends. So anyway, I like to continue with this sketch and listen to the story more. So hopefully you would continue watching more. Okay, me just continue, guys, and hopefully you're not bored. Okay. Also, I forgot. Earlier, I set up the speed of my audiobook to 10.30, 1.30 speed. I'm and midway I reset it to around 1.20 when I realize it. So right now I think 1.20 is a optimal speed. 1.15 I think is kind of slow for me. So it's up to you guys if you want to uh, listen it to a slower speed. But I think 1.5 is 1.15 is the optimal one. Okay. Anyway,
Conscious, Vandali returned to his home in the forest with the undead while clutching the fragment of his mother's bone that contained her spirit. He felt as if he would die of hunger, but fortunately, a raccoon had been caught in a trap set by Dasa, so he drank its blood before passing out. By the time he woke up, the sun had already risen. "Good morning, Mom, everyone." As Vandali opened his eyes, he quietly greeted his new companions in the house, though he only managed to actually let out an unintelligible noise that sounded like "you." "So, have the hunters come after me?" Bone Monkey, who was standing next to the bed, shook his head. It seemed that his good fortune had not yet arrived. "First, if I gather up all the information I learned yesterday the Knights of Baronet Bestero who governs Ivbigia, High Priest Gordon and the Holy Knights under his command, the ones who believe in Alda, the god of law and fate, would begin searching the forest today to hunt Vandali down. However, the hunter Orby had not told them where this house was, so they would take some time before they found this place. But the hunter Orby himself, along with his companions, would come here first in order to obtain this rare damp baby for themselves. Against them, my combat ability is enough to take on the three of them, I guess. He created several hundred undead yesterday. However, the majority of them were small animals such as mice and insects. There were only around 30 of them that would be useful in combat, including Bone Monkey, but they were fundamentally weak. When he was alive, Bone Monkey probably had the strength of an orangutan, enough to be able to easily tear off a human's arm. But that wasn't the case now. In fact, when Vandali had tested Bone Monkey's strength, he found that Bone Monkey was even weaker than himself. Though in this case, perhaps the abnormal thing would be Vandali's own strength, not Bone Monkey's weakness. Bone Monkey was even less agile than a normal human. As for endurance, he would be resistant to arrows and knives due to being made only of bones and dead flesh, but if he were to be hit a few times with a hoe, he would fall apart. On top of that, when Vandali somehow managed to check Bone Monkey's status screen, he had no passive skills or undead skills. The undead that Vandali had at hand right now were all rank 1. After all, they were all monsters that would be defeated by any untrained villager in Lambda in a one-on-one fight. However, he had 30 of them. With that being the case, he could make something work out with a little ingenuity. For now, the insects will find the enemy. Bone Monkey and 4 others can guard me inside the house. The others Vandali decided to turn the tables on Orby and the other hunters first. He had wanted to hear about various things from Dasa, including information about his father, but it would be problematic if the hunters arrived while he was doing that. So he would catch them first before listening to what Dasa had to say. Orby continued through the forest, leading 2 of his hunter companions with whom he had been drinking yesterday. No matter how elite the Holy Knights were, they wouldn't be able to find the hiding place the Dark Elf had built right away. They would definitely be able to catch the baby first. He was sure of it. "Oi, I'll just make it clear that I know. I don't plan on turning into bear or wolf food before we get rich." Being professional hunters, they were confident. This forest wasn't some devil's nest where monsters were prevalent, but it was inhabited by dangerous beasts such as bears and wolves, and even some weak monsters like goblins also lived here. Being cautious on the lookout for threats like these, they continued making their way through the forest. "This is strange. Aren't these the footsteps of a big monkey? And the ones here are a bear." Fortunately, their caution had allowed them to spot the footsteps left by the undead as they made their way back from Ivbigia. "You think so? Aren't they a bit shallow for the footsteps of a monkey and a bear?" However, in Orby's eyes, the footsteps looked too shallow. Footsteps left in the earth would be deeper the heavier its own air was, but these footsteps appeared to belong to a very light creature. The shape is weird, too. They look a bit small and the bear's ones are missing some toes. The reason they appeared that way is because the creature who had produced them was an undead made only of bones. Its body weight was less than half that of when it was alive, it was missing the pad of its paw and several of its digits had been broken off. The adventurers would take precautions if they were facing this strange monster as their main enemy, but I'm sure they just look like that because there are multiple beasts' footprints overlapping each other. Obby and his companions had only experienced hunting monsters from time to time to earn a little extra money, so they didn't think much of it. The knowledge that this forest didn't have many monsters helped them push the footprints from their minds, thinking it was just their imagination. We're almost there. There's a cave dug out in a small cliff. That was her hiding place. Alright, let's go catch that baby while it's still alive. And so Obby and his companions reached Darcy's home. The trees were sparse in front of the house, with small spaces in between them. There were traces of fire that had been used for cooking and other signs that someone had been living here. There are quite a lot of things lying around. As the hunters looked around, they saw many tracks that looked as if they had been dug up, as well as ivy and animal bones scattered around. Cheat. Let's go inside. Clicking his tongue, Obby opened the door to check whether the baby was still here. At that moment, the earth rose up with a resentful sounding groan. What is this? A golem. Yeah, it's an earth golem. The earth golem with a body made of dirt that had been lying in wait was now standing up. Hi. There are undead beneath the golem. Underneath its body were the undead skeletons of a wolf and a bear. Run. Where? We're surrounded. Obby and his companions who had approached the door were now surrounded by the golem and undead. The weapons available to them were their short swords and their bows and arrows. Even if the rank of the golems and undead were the lowest possible, these were the worst weapons to fight them with. A snake. No, it's ivy. The ivy is moving. And then the ivy on the ground that should have been dead began moving like a snake and winding itself around the hunters. Sheet. Let go of me. Even as they drew their short swords to try and cut the ivy, the golem and undead pressed onto them and various pots began flying through the air and throwing themselves at the hunters' heads. They couldn't escape. Obby and his companions were captured alive. I guess it went well. Seeing the hunters bound by the undead ivy, unable to speak, Vandali gave a sigh of relief. He had spirits inhabit the ground outside the house to create an earth golem and then buried the undead beneath it. The undead and the golem didn't breathe, and they simply smelled of dirt like the rest of the forest, so the hunters couldn't notice them if they were completely still. The same applied to the ivy and pots. They wouldn't suspect that the discarded items scattered around the ground would turn out to be undead. Well then, I want to hear what these guys have to say. Obby and his companions opened their eyes wide in shock at the sight of Vandali riding on Bone Monkey's back, looking down at them. They had never imagined that the baby they had been planning to capture would be commanding undead at this age. This was the difference between Vandali and the High Priest Gordon, who reprimanded his subordinates. But first, I have to establish a way to have a conversation. Vandali, who was still only able to mumble unintelligible sounds that sounded like a couldn't converse with the hunters. And so Vandali created a sand golem out of the gravel and sand. Moga moga. The hunters began making fearful noises at the sight of the human-sized golem rising up from the gravel and sand. They were likely assuming that they were about to be killed. However, the sand golem did not raise its heavy fist above their heads. Parts of it instead crumbled off in front of them to form words in sand on its body. Stop making so much noise, be quiet. Answer my questions. Nice, it worked. He had thought that if it was possible to make turn part of Ivbigia's outer wall into a golem to change its shape, it would be possible to change the shape of the sand golem to form letters. This idea seemed to be a great success. Well, he had to supply the golem with a considerable amount of mana, which took its toll on his mental endurance. But the problem was whether the hunters would be able to read Japanese characters. In order to test this, he unbound the hunters' mouths, who had now fallen quiet. What do you want to know? You can ask whatever you want. But in exchange, spare our lives. Yeah, we'll tell you anything we know. We'll keep quiet about this place. So please let us go. And then they began pleading for their lives. It seemed that in Lambda, the spoken and written language was Japanese. That's convenient, but why is that the case? Now that I think about it, according to the knowledge Rod Corti shared with me, he summoned champions from another world to Lambda in the past. Is it because of that? Well, he would figure that out when he had time later. Vandali decided to question the hunters through writing and gather information from them. While they could read hiragana and katakana, it seemed that they were mostly incapable of reading kanji. Their initial pleading for their lives had been done by guessing the situation rather than being able to read Vandali's writing. Since this meant that Vandali would need to write more characters with the sand golem, it increased the amount of mana he needed to spend and took a greater toll on him. But not all of his questions would have favorable answers. What is a job? Huh? What, you want us to tell you our jobs? We're hunters, of course. What are experience points? Experience points are experience points, right? Who is Elder, the god of law and fate? Ah, that's a god. What is a job and what are experience points in Lambda? Vandali was asking simple questions, but the hunters were not giving helpful answers. From the hunter's point of view, Vandali's questions were too simple. It was like asking on Earth, what is air or what is water ? Even so, if the hunters were educated and had enough vocabulary, they would be able to give useful answers. But Vandali understood that he couldn't expect this from these hunters. I'll ask Mum about stuff like that later. Darsa would answer any of Vandali's questions with an easy-to-understand explanation. After all, she was a mother raising her child. Tell me about Baronet Bestero and his knights. Vandali decided to change gears and ask information that they would know about the other enemies. The feudal lord who took over about 10 years ago is a person with a lot of ambition. He doesn't have any other special characteristics, he's your typical nobleman. I haven't heard about anything that makes him different from the other nobles. There are 5 knights, he uses them as soldiers as they're stronger than the rest of us. Though it seems they undergo training as well. That's why they're not that strong. In fact, why don't we get rid of them together? If we team up with you it'll be simple. Vandali decided to ignore that last part. It seemed that Baronet Bestero did not have many pawns and they were apparently not particularly skilled. This area was likely considered a peaceful region by its population. At least, its population considered it as such. Just answer my questions. Tell me everything you know about High Priest Gordon and his holy knights. The High Priest and his holy knights are never in the town. They came to the town about half a month ago with wanted posters featuring a damper and a witch that birthed it. That is to say, you and your honorable mother he's a clergyman who is famous as a vampire slayer, and with the holy knights, they're like a collection of elite individuals. Yeah, for a clergyman, he's a ridiculously strong freak who used that strength to climb all the way to the position of high priest. He's already killed multiple vampire and their subordinates, vampire samas and their dedicated subordinates. He has already dealt with vampire samas that had lived for hundreds of years, and rumors of it that he's comparable to a B-class adventurer. But if you team up with us, we're familiar with the terrain so outwitting him will be easy. See, so please make us your subordinates. I see. That priest is a capable vampire hunter. Next I want to know about the 5 colored blades, but before that this is a good time, so let's have a meal first. He had the undead bring one of the 3 male hunters forward. What is this? You're making me your subordinate? We'll definitely be helpful to you, our skills with a bow are well known around Ivbji. We'll really be helpful, we'll do anything for you, so please spare me. Bone Monkey had grabbed a hold of the man's head so that he cannot move his neck. He was begging for his life in a high-pitched voice, but Vandali wasn't listening. His fangs plunged into the man's neck. Kaiwa. Johan. Ignoring the screams of the man called Johan and the other hunters, he greedily devoured the blood, filling his throat with it. It feels greasier than rabbit's blood, and it tastes a bit saltier as well. Of course, he would have preferred to be held by Darsa and drink her milk. But this was his first meal of the day, so he simply continued drinking Johan's blood until his screaming stopped and he fell limp. Fooah, Bone Monkey. Give my back a little pat. Yeah, right, the burp. As Vandali burped, he showed the now deathly pale body of Johan to the other hunters. And then he directs words of sand at them once more. Didn't I tell you to just answer my questions? Seeing the dead Johan whose blood had been completely consumed and Vandali's expression that had not changed in the slightest after killing him, Obby and the other remaining hunters simply nodded their heads. They were facing a mere baby, but this baby had no childish naivety or pity. They finally realized that Vandali would not hesitate to kill them if they showed the slightest sign of disobedience. Now then, what do you know about the 5 colored blades and Heinz, the blue flame sword? From that point, his interrogation of Orby and the other hunter proceeded smoothly. The example he had made of Johan was incredibly terrifying. The 5 colored blades were a group of 5 adventurers and Heinz was its leader, a highly successful B-class adventurer even though he was still in his teenage years. The other members were class, so they were a group of capable individuals. As I thought, he and High Priest Gordon are enemies I can't defeat in my current state. The next thing he asked them about was the geography of this region, the area surrounding Baronet Bestero's territory and the places that High Priest Gordon and his knights would be searching right now. The answers to these questions were quite helpful. He had asked the animal spirits inhabiting Bone Monkey and the other undead as well, but he hadn't managed to get a good idea of the situation from them. The spirits were more talkative than they had been yesterday, but they were originally animals and insects, after all. They didn't have the sense of distance and direction that a human could use as a reference. There was no problem when they guided him around, but trying to make a map out of their information inevitably resulted in chaos. Well then, I should stock up on food and water while I have the chance. High Priest Gordon was searching a different place right now, but this forest was not that large. They would be able to search the whole forest within 10 days. With that said, trying to make a hasty escape would be a poor choice. Due to the mismatched eye colors that Vandali possessed as a special damp characteristic, he couldn't conceal his true nature so he couldn't approach any areas inhabited by humans. However, without somewhere safe to hide like the house in the cave, living outdoors would be too dangerous. The reason for that being I'm only 6 months old, so I need a lot of sleep. In fact, I'm quite sleepy right now. Despite the fact that one of his parents was a vampire, no matter how high his attribute point values were, no matter how many skills he had acquired, he was still a baby. Though it was considerably better than when he was only a month old, he was still frequently sleepy and found it difficult to stay up for long periods of time. He could resist the effects of sleep deprivation with his status effect resistance skill, but that would have negative effects on his development. Darsa wouldn't want that. Therefore, Vandali decided to stay hidden until High Priest Gordon gave up the search. He had never imagined that he would be living a hikikomori's lifestyle at 6 months of age, but this was necessary to survive. Oi, what's wrong? Don't you have anything more to ask? If that's the case, let us go. Orby and the other hunter began to make some noise, but their role as information sources had already been fulfilled. The ivy covered their mouths once more. Wait. Please, let us go. I have a Muguyu. I have what? A fiancé? A wife? A young daughter? An aging mother? Considering that he sold out a mother with a young son, what was he trying to say? Even if he had something, it made no difference to the roles the hunters were to play. Vandali informed them of this through sand letters. You are merely food for me. 2 muffled screams came from the hunters. Once upon a time, there were 2 great gods in this world. The great black god, Diachmel. The great white god, Arizan. The 2 gods fought each other. Nobody knew which of them was good and which of them was evil. However, nothing existed but the 2 of them, so they fought each other. It seemed that the conflict between the 2 gods would go on forever, but in the end, Diachmel and Arizan defeated each other simultaneously. The great black and white gods lay on top of each other and new gods were born from their shells. Vida, the goddess of life and love. Alda, the god of light and law. Zandak, the war god of fire and destruction. Beria, the goddess of water and knowledge. Shazarian, the god of wind and art. Botin, mother of the earth and goddess of craftsmanship. Rickolant, the genie of time and magic. Zeruan, the god of space and creation. These 8 gods of the elements as well as the dragon emperor god Marduk, the colossus god Zerno and the beast god Ganpaplio were known as the 11 founding gods. These 11 gods did not use their power to fight each other like the great gods that came before them, they worked together and created the planet Lambda. The 8 gods of the elements created humans, modeled after themselves, and began to teaching and guiding them as their followers. The dragon emperor god Marduk created dragons, and the colossus god Zerno created colossi as their followers. To provide food for them, the beast god Ganpaplio birthed countless birds and wild animals and released fish into the seas. The war god Zandak and the goddess Botin gave birth to the dwarf race, while the goddess Beria and Shazarian gave birth to the elves. People became a general term that applied to all sentient races, and the creatures became a general term that applied to all sentient races, and the creatures that had been known as people up until that point came to be known as humans. The world created by these events was peaceful. The people believed in their gods, the dragons and colossi were wise, There was plenty of wildlife in the mountains for them to eat without fighting over territory, and there were bountiful blessings in the sea. However, the peace was shattered by the appearance of the demon king Eugeranes from the abyss beyond the stars. After descending upon Lambda, Eugeranes began a war to take over the world using the evil gods that were his servants. The demon king's tainted mana gave birth to monsters such as orcs and goblins that had never existed in Lambda before, and the demon king used them to fight the other gods. Though the people of Lambda had polished their fighting skills for competition and hunting the wildlife that sustained them, they were thrown into chaos as they had never experienced a fight to the death, and the gods were driven into a corner. The war god Xantark, the dragon emperor god Marduk, the colossus god Zerno and the others fought bravely with their followers, and the genie Ricaland bestowed magic upon the humans and gave them commands, but they could not turn the tides of the battle. The beast god Ganpaplio put up a good fight, but was eventually destroyed. To fight the demon king's forces, Zeru, the god of space and creation, summoned 7 champions from another world. The 7 champions taught the people techniques for fighting, gave them the knowledge to make great weapons, and fought bravely at the front lines themselves. And so, through battle after battle, the demon king was finally destroyed and sealed away. Not even a single piece of his body remained. The evil gods that were his subordinates lost their powers, some were destroyed and others were sealed away into a death-like state. However, the final result was difficult to call a victory. The war god Xantark was cursed by the evil gods and fell into darkness, Peria sank into the depths of the oceans, and Shizarian returned to the wind. Bosia was sealed deep within the earth, while Ricalant and Zeruan entered a deep sleep to regain their power. Marduk was torn to pieces and Zerno's heart was destroyed. Their followers' powers weakened, the number of dragons grew fewer and the weaker drakes increased in number. The colossi became monsters that worshipped evil gods. Finally, there were only 3 champions left, and the population of the people had decreased to the point that even if the elves and the dwarves joined the remaining humans, who had a considerable population before the conflict, they were barely able to maintain a single city. The remaining population was not enough to sustain civilization and culture. Even after the demon king was defeated, the surface of Lambda was overrun by monsters that had been corrupted by his mana during the conflict with his forces, and devil's nests existed all over the place. The surviving monsters began to breed and multiplying endlessly. Alder, one of the 2 gods who still had power left, chose to work with the champions to guide the surviving people. However, the goddess Veda believed that creating new races of people and having them join the other races would be a faster way to restore Lambda. Veda was the goddess of life and love. Her powers were more suited to creating new races than for battle. First, she mated with the sun giant Talos, who had retained his noble spirit and virtues without becoming a monster. She gave birth to a race of titans with robust, large bodies that could barely fit in human towns. Next, she mated with Tiamat, the most powerful of the surviving dragons that had been Marduk's followers, and gave birth to a race of draconids, humans with the power and horns of a dragon. And then, with the kings of the beasts that had followed Ganpaplio, she gave birth to a great variety of beast people, and with Tristan, the god of the seas who had been Peria's right-hand man, she gave birth to the mer people. Following that, she mated with an elf that had been in her service at that time, giving birth to the Dark Elves, who had the same mana that elves did while also possessing outstanding physical prowess. Alder criticized the goddess's actions, saying that they would only plunge the already ruined world into further chaos. As the god of law, Alder could not stand idly by as Veda gave birth to new races, one after another. But Veda believed that her actions were correct, so they could never come to an agreement in their discussions. Finally, Veda mated with monsters to give birth to Lamia, Scylla, Arachne, centaurs, harpies, Magians and other monster races. And then she infused the power of the life attribute into one of the champions who had fallen in the battle with the demon king, Zakat, to turn him into an undead. She mated with him to give birth to vampires. The original vampires had powers that rivaled that of gods in every aspect. And they were able to share this power with the other races. By giving their blood to others, they could turn them into vampires. But Alder was outraged at the fact that Veda had mated with monsters and given birth to vampires. With the 3 remaining champions, he set out to exterminate Veda, who had given birth to a race that would overthrow the balance of the world, and the race that she had given birth to. Of course, to protect the new race of her children, Veda and the revived champion Zakat fought against Alder and his followers. However, by the smallest of differences, she was defeated and was dealt a deep blow, fell from her position as a god and disappeared into the devil's nests with the champion Zakat. Alder was victorious, but he did not have the strength to eliminate the remaining vampires. In addition, the goddess of the life attribute had now disappeared, and Alda now had to take up her role despite the fact that his own body was now exhausted. Alda now called himself the god of light, law and life, and his followers praised him as the god of law and fate. But even 100,000 years after the battle with Vida, the world was still in a state of chaos. This is the legend of the origins of Lambda. Dasa: thanks, Mom. That was very helpful. Vandali: after Vandali finished preparing to hide in the house, he asked Dasa, whose spirit was residing inside the bone fragment, about how the world of Lambda came into existence. He had continued creating golems from the earth and rock of the cave, instructing them to stand guard there. In order to prevent the house from caving in, he had the golems made from the earth and rock from deeper within the cave to move towards the entrance, while digging the cave deeper towards the back. And then he released the spirits from the golems so that they sealed the entrance. He could change the golems' shapes as long as he had mana, so he had thought that he would be able to use them for construction, and he was right. He had left broken furniture and vases when he sealed the entrance in order to make it appear as if the cave had collapsed. But he was just praying that High Priest Gordon wouldn't give an order like dig out the cave until you find that Damp's corpse. He had already filled up the cave over 50 meters from the entrance while expanding it deeper, something that would normally be impossible without ordering some large-scale construction or hiring an Earth attribute mage. He had left a fist-sized hole to allow air to pass through, so there was no problem there. He didn't need any lighting, thanks to his dark vision skill. Vandali was prepared for his new underground lifestyle. And now he was talking to Dasa to pass the time. So this is Mage, a country in the northwest part of the Barngaya continent that's a part of the Mid Empire. The empire and its countries worship Alda, the god of law and fate, as the official religion. No wonder it's so dangerous. Alda was a god who had fought Vida over the races she had given birth to, saying that they would throw the world's balance out of order. It was no wonder that a half-vampire would be subject to persecution, no, extermination. The Mid Empire and the adventurers' guilds in its countries, where the Church of Alda had a strong influence, had extermination requests openly on display. Incidentally, the part used as proof of extermination, the proof of extermination that was required was a deep crimson eyeball. It made sense to hide in the forest in such a situation. It seemed that dark elves like Dasa, as well as beast people, draconids and the other races that Vida had given birth to following the battle with the Demon King were also targets of persecution. In the Mid Empire and its countries, only humans, elves and dwarves were accepted as people, titans, dark elves and beast people were discriminated against as demi-humans. The most conspicuous discriminatory behavior was that people were only used as slaves if they were criminals, while there were no restrictions on the buying, selling, ownership and use of demi-human slaves. Including vampires, the races that Vida had given birth to by mating with monsters were, of course, simply exterminated as monsters. Though the reality was that for every vampire and lamia that the adventurers and soldiers of the Mid Empire killed, there was a dead adventurer or soldier killed in retaliation, and even civilians suffered casualties. The followers of Alda claimed that this was proof that they were evil, that their god was right. Meanwhile, Vida's followers believed that the reason they had become monsters that harmed humans was because they had lost the guidance of the goddess. In other words, it was all Alda's fault. This argument had apparently continued for many tens of thousands of years. Next, tell me about my father, vampires and dampers. Vandali: all right. But it's time for your afternoon nap, so I'll continue when you wake up. Dasa: okay Vandali. You have acquired the golem creation skill. Name, Vandali, race, damper, dark elf, age, 0.5 years old, title, none, job, ordinary person, level, 0, job history, none, attributes, vitality, 18, mana, 100,600,000, strength, 27, agility, 2, stamina, 33, intelligence, 25, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1, rapid healing, level 2, death attribute magic, level 3, status effect resistance, level 2, magic resistance, level 1, dark vision, mental corruption, level 10, death attribute charm, level 1, active skills, blood sucking, level 1, surpass limits, level 2, golem transmutation, level 1, new, curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience points independently. Chapter 4, Love for the Sun. The goblin collapsed as its skull was caved in with a dull noise. Are goblins the only enemies that are going to come out? The high priest of Elder, the god of law and fate, hurled abuse at the goblins as he beat them to death with his favorite mace. High Priest Gordon, is it not likely that the Damp either escaped with his vampire father or was buried alive when that cave collapsed? So said one of the holy knights under his command, but Gordon was not satisfied. Bormac Gordon was originally a commoner, but he was now a great man who had climbed to the position of High Priest by his 30s using his faith, physical strength and his magic of the life and light attributes. Now he had a burning obsession with exterminating vampires, lamias, Scylla and the other monsters that Vida had given birth to. Alder, the god of law and fate, is the only one with authority in the world of Lambda, and he has determined that the mere existence of these creatures is evil. It is our duty as his followers to destroy them. Like the other zealous followers of Elder, Gordon earnestly believed this with no doubts. He felt no shame in having killed a dark elf, or in his current task of hunting down her Damp son. He was proud, believing that his actions were those of justice. For that reason, he had been conducting a very thorough search of this small forest to find the Damp, but the search had run into problems. Unable to contact the hunters who had sold out the dark elf to lead them through the forest, he had hired other hunters and joined forces with the feudal lord's knights, but they had only encountered wild animals like wolves, bears and boars, and the occasional weak monsters like goblins that came out to attack them. 5 days after they had begun their search, they discovered a cave that someone appeared to have been living in that had collapsed, but they hadn't been able to find the Damp's corpse. Gordon had thought to dig out the whole cave, but had no choice but to give up on that idea because of the risk of it collapsing on top of them. If they had a construction specialist or a dwarf miner at hand, it would be a different story, but there was no demand for a construction specialist in this area right now, so they were unable to hire such a person. The reason they continued searching the forest for 2 more months despite this was that the hunter that had sold out the dark elf and 2 of his friends had simply gone missing after setting out to hunt the Damp. 3 hunters who were all familiar with the geography of this area had all gone missing. On top of that, their corpses still hadn't been found. Gordon's intuition told him that this was not the result of some coincidence or unfortunate accident, but something had taken revenge on them. The Damp in question is apparently still a baby, but it's not out of the question. There was a reported incident in the past where a 3-year-old Damp slaughtered a party of D-class adventurers. Giving up here would mean allowing evil to take root and grow in the future. He had to hunt the Damp down and turn him into ash. High Priest Gordon, it is impossible for us to make our search of the forest any more detailed than we have already done. Baronet Bestero has withdrawn his knights already as well. However, not everyone shared Gordon's zeal or saw the impending threat that he did. The feudal lord, Baronet Bestero, had dispatched 5 knights and half of his soldiers to help with the search, but now he grimly refused to offer any help at all. He could not allow the soldiers and knights that were needed to uphold public order to spend too long searching the forest. In fact, he criticized the continuation of the search, asking, is there no other work that the high priest could be doing for the people? I know that the inhabitants of Ivbija have expressed their discontent. This forest was an important source of resources for the people of Ivbija, and the high priest had told them, you cannot enter the forest while we are searching for the Damp, as it is too dangerous. It was only natural that the people of Ivbija were unhappy about being unable to enter the forest for 2 whole months. No, it is not only the people. The adventurers are not happy either. Well, they are F-class and E-class adventurers of no importance. They are taking their complaints to the guild, saying that they are having their work taken away from them. The monsters such as goblins that the adventurers received payment to exterminate had heavily decreased in population during Gordon's search of the forest. Of course, this resulted in a sharp drop in the income of those adventurers. In addition, Ivbija was a central point of commerce between villages and towns, so there were many merchants and wealthy travelers requesting escorts, but as the adventurers accepted those requests, there were less adventurers operating inside Ivbija itself. Naturally, the Adventurers Guild was not pleased by this. Baronet Bestero didn't approve of the number of adventurers decreasing either. High Priest Gordon and his men were keeping the population of goblins in check for now, but they were not permanent residents of this town. After they left, he had no way of knowing if enough adventurers would return to control the population of goblins, who reproduced very quickly. What are you saying we should do? Surely you're not going to suggest we spare the goblins that come and attack us. Like I said, perhaps it is time to give up. My words are not those of the feudal lord, but there are plenty of other places that could benefit from our presence. In reality, while they were spending their time here, the vampires were moving in the shadows. Other monsters of Vida were also causing harm to the people. Was it acceptable to continue spending time searching for this damp with no leads to follow? We have no choice. We will leave Ivbigia the day after tomorrow. The red evening sun shone on Gordon's bitter face. He had a strong feeling that the damper would be laughing at them in the nights to come. That damper, Vandali, spent the afternoon at High Priest Gordon left sunbathing to his heart's content. Sunlight love you. He proclaimed his love for the sunlight. He had recently become able to speak, though it was not completely coherent yet. Living for that long underground had been harsh on him. He had thought that it would be for 1 month at most, but Gordon and his men had persisted for 2 whole months and Vandali had spent all that time living in the dark, surrounded by earth and rocks. He had used his death attribute magic to prolong the lives of the 2 hunters, but they only lasted about half a month. After that, he had Bone Monkey and the other undead to crush the wheat grains and dried meat that Darcy had left behind and soak it with water to make baby food for him to stave his hunger off with. When he could no longer stand that, he desperately looked for insects in the dirt to eat. His search led to the discovery of a stream of underground water. He had thought the cave would flood and he would drown, but it ended up being a fortunate event. His water supply had fallen low and the discovery of this underground water had allowed him to clean his diapers. Up until then, he had made a golem out of the earth to change shape and dig a hole, drop in used diapers and then bury them. Having run out of the ones that Darcy had made before, he had been forced to use diapers made from the clothes taken from the dead hunters, and even those were running out. He could use death attribute magic to sterilize himself, but he couldn't stand having soiled himself. As a person, that was not acceptable. He had been living on earthworms and sap from tree roots for the past few days. Thanks to a new skill he had learned, danger sense, death, he could find the ones that weren't fatally poisonous, but as he consumed them, for some reason, his status effect resistance skills level increased. There was likely something in the food he ate that was poisonous, though not enough to kill him. I don't ever want to have to live a life where I can consider catching a mole to be a miracle ever again. He firmly told himself that. Vandali, being a damper, could see in the dark just as well as he could in the middle of the day. But that didn't mean he didn't need sunlight. After all, he was half dark elf. He had been worried that he was going to die of vitamin deficiency-related diseases. High Priest Gordon, adventurers of the 5-colored Blades Party, please be well. Vandali earnestly prayed for the well-being of High Priest Gordon and his men, who had left Ivbigia and Baronet Bestero today, and their 5-colored Bladestat had left 2 months ago. Please don't die until I kill you. He earnestly prayed for them to not be killed by someone else or die by accident or illness. The limit for a human to be in the dark is around 90 hours. If you're trapped in darkness for that long, apparently it causes some mental problems, but I seem to have endured it surprisingly well. His sunbathing had calmed him down. Relieved that his mental condition had not changed over the past 2 months, he had the undead set traps to catch rabbits and other small animals. When he checked his status, a skill with an ominous-sounding name called Mental Corruption had been upgraded all the way up until level 10. Was this because he had sworn to take revenge? Well, it also seemed to serve as a mental stability skill, so he didn't think much of it. As for his death attribute charm skill, he thought it was a skill that he had used in Origin. There were several occasions when the elderly researchers in Origin that had treated him as a guinea pig died of strokes, became spirits and then completely changed their personalities and apologized to him in tears. He hadn't thought badly of them for it. If it weren't for his conversations with the spirits in Origin, his mind would have crumbled long before his body died. However, when Orbi and his companions had approached him as spirits after they died, he had felt only disgust for them. Vandali did not want to let them pass on peacefully, so he had forced them to inhabit a stone pillar that was supporting the cave, and they were still there now. For now, I guess I have to stay quiet and hidden until I grow a bit bigger. Over the past 2 months, Vandali had grown teeth other than his fangs. He was now also able to walk, though with poor balance due to the relatively large size of his head. But he still needed to sleep for long hours and wasn't able to run. He was capable of only an unsteady waddle, so even if he spent a whole day walking he wouldn't cover much distance. If he wanted to leave this place, he still needed more time to either grow up or make preparations. Because of that, he had to postpone his revenge on Baronet Bestero, his knights and the people of Ivbigia. He had already thought of how he was going to do it and had the confidence that he could pull it off, so he was feeling impatient, but it was something that he had to endure. It's already winter, huh? Now that I think about it, I still haven't asked Mum about this world's history. But before that, can I catch some prey whose blood I can drink? Though he had finally come outside, it seemed that he would die of starvation in the cold of winter. Vandali let out a sigh at the harshness of this world. In Lambda, vampires were divided into 4 different categories. First, there was the vampire born between Vida and the undead champion Zakat, who had long since perished and had his name forgotten, the true ancestor. The ones who had directly received the blessing from the true ancestor or those who were his direct descendants were known as pure breeds. Those descended from the pure breeds with vampire blood that had thinned over the generations were known as the noble-born. And finally, those given the blood by the pure breeds and noble-born and taken as servants did not inherit the vampire's magical abilities such as their charming gaze. They inherited only their physical abilities such as their superhuman strength and regenerative capabilities. They were known as their subordinates. Generally, the closer a vampire was related to the true ancestor, the stronger their powers were. But vampires had considerable individual differences, so some subordinates who were even more powerful than noble-born vampires also existed. The common features among all vampires were their weakness to sunlight and the anti-undead life attribute magic taught among the followers of Alder. The other feature was the need to drink blood to sustain themselves. Vandali's father was a pure-breed subordinate. He wasn't even one of the exceptional ones that were stronger than the noble-born, he was simply a normal human who had been turned into a subordinate. His name was Valen. He had originally been a thug living in the slums. The only thing that was not ordinary about Valen was his resistance against the sun. He had been even more resistant to the sun than most humans, so his pure-breed master valued him highly. He had ordered Valen to carry out various tasks and gather information among the people. That was when he met Darsa. Just like in old love stories, the two of them had fallen in love at first sight. However, in the modern age, vampires were also divided into 2 factions. There were the conservatives who continued to believe in Vida, who had been defeated by Alder, and the extremists who had converted to follow evil gods. The latter overwhelmingly outnumbered the former. If Valen's master had belonged to the conservatives, there wouldn't have been any problems with the love between him and Darsa. But as an extremist, he was strongly opposed to the dilution of the vampire blood with that of other races, even if that race was another race created by Vida. Making use of his special trait that allowed him to use his powers even during the day, he eloped with the pregnant Darsa, but in the end, he fought with his pursuers to protect his unborn son. And so Darsa, who managed to escape to this forest, gave her son half of his father's name and half of her own name. So, that's why I'm named Vandali. Vandali, that's right. Do you like it? Darsa, yes, I like it. It's a very good name. Vandali, who for the first time in a while was able to eat something other than insects and tree root sap, listened to her story about his father that she had already told him dozens of times. That's good. I'm sure your father would be happy, too. We'd agreed that we'd name you Vandali if you were a boy and Vasu if you were a girl. So, where was I? Ah yes, I was telling you about the vampires. Darsa, with a smile, Darsa began to repeat the story that she had just finished telling. Her memory was prone to quick failure. After the death of her body, her spirit was deteriorating as it spent time in this world. There were cases where spirits would retain their personalities even after 100 years if they were tenacious or harbored strong hatred and strength of will, but she felt regrets about the fact that she had been reunited with Vandali as she was about to pass on. Even though she was inhabiting a piece of her own remains, her spirit could not recover. Even so, if I keep supplying her with mana, she'll last 100 years. As he listened to Darsa talk, he decided to find a way to make her a new body within that time. Despite the few problems that she was having with her memory, Darsa could still clearly remember things from when she was alive, so she told Vandali everything she knew. Lambda's time and calendar were the same as Earth's, with 24 hours in a day, 12 months of 360 days in a year. The reason Japanese was spoken was because it had spread from the champions who had spoken Japanese in their original birthplaces after they survived the battle with the Demon King. Currently, only common Japanese terms were used and commoners could only read hiragana and katakana. The ability to read kanji was limited to nobles and merchants who had received a higher degree of education. Experience points were a quantification of the life experiences that a person had been through. The people of Lambda increased their experience points little by little as they lived their lives. Of course, defeating monsters would grant experience points. However, the amount of experience points gained through certain experiences depended on one's job. Jobs were apparently the blessings of the gods that existed since before the Demon King appeared. The people were feeble when compared to gods, so they were given jobs in the hope that one day they would grow to be able to stand alongside the gods. Jobs determined attribute points and adjusted how new skills were acquired, and if a job's level was raised to 100, one could change jobs. For example, if someone reached level 100 as an apprentice warrior, he could change jobs to a warrior. As well as the warriors and mages, there were farmers, craftsmen and the like. People with jobs like warrior and mage would gain most experience from defeating monsters and enemies in battle, while farmers would gain most experience by doing everyday farm work or doing agriculture research, and craftsmen would do so by crafting things. Well, it would be strange for someone with a warrior job to gain a lot of experience by doing farm work. It would also be strange for a craftsman's skill at crafting things to increase by defeating monsters. In other words, it was a system to encourage warriors to be warriors and farmers to be farmers. Everyone should work hard in their specialized fields. Incidentally, monsters had no jobs but had levels, and apparently evolved or transformed into a higher rank monster upon reaching level 100. Therefore, it had been possible for Vandali's father, Valen, to survive long enough and evolve from a subordinate to a higher rank monster. If he had managed to do so, he might have survived. Now I know just how bad the curses that Rod Corti gave me are, the ones that prevent me from gaining existing jobs and gaining experience points for myself. Cannot learn existing jobs. In other words, the curse prevented him from attaining a job whose existence was already known, so it was troublesome. If he didn't discover some new, unknown job, he would forever be jobless. The curse that prevented him from gaining experience points on his own was likely even more serious. While others could steadily increase their levels, no matter how hard Vandali worked to train himself or study, he wouldn't gain even a single point of experience. 8 months have actually passed since I was born. I've gone through much harder experiences than the typical infant. I've trained myself in magic, used it in practice and finally even captured Orby and those other hunters, but I haven't leveled up. At this rate, he would reach adulthood and still be level 0. Being a damper, his attribute points were high, but it would still be impossible for him to work as an adventurer and a soldier. With that said, it would also be difficult for him to work as an industrial worker like farmer or craftsman. With no job, he would not have any adjustments for how he would acquire new skills. In other words, he would have to work several times harder than regular craftsmen to compete with them. In addition, Vandali was aware that he had poor communication skills. He had no talent for communicating with people. He had been born with anxiety problems. The more I think about it, the more I get the feeling that I've been cornered in this life. I'll stop thinking about it, then. Let's go to sleep. They say that sleeping children grow up well. Vandali had Bone Monkey put out the fire that he had started by making wood golems out of 2 pieces of firewood and having them rub against each other. Wrapped in furs, he went to sleep, leaving the other undead to keep watch over him. He drifted off, thinking that the lullaby that Darsa's spirit was singing to him sounded nice, but wishing he could feel her warmth. Incidentally, Darsa didn't know of any dampers other than Vandali, and dampers themselves were very rare. Therefore, she didn't know anything about dampers and he had been unable to ask her about them. Name, Vandali, race, damper, dark elf, age, 8 months old, title, none, job, ordinary person, level, 0, job history, none, attributes, vitality, 21, mana, 100,001,200, strength, 31, agility, 4, stamina, 30, intelligence, 27, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1, rapid healing, level 2, death attribute magic, level 3, status effect resistance, level 3, level up, magic resistance, level 1, dark vision, mental corruption, level 10, death attribute charm, level 1, active skills, blood sucking, level 2, level up, surpass limits, level 2, golem transmutation, level 2, level up. Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience points independently. Chapter 5, an idea. If I can't get stronger, then those around me should get stronger instead. Time for training. Vandali told this to his undead servants after making them line up in front of the cave. Because of Rod Corty's curse, Vandali couldn't level up or change jobs, thus making it impossible for him to become stronger on his own. So he tried to change his way of thinking and thought: if I can't become stronger, then I'll just make my servants stronger. His reasoning was that if the undead following him were stronger, he could become capable of doing a wider range of things. Going to the town with them might be difficult, but Mom did say that there were some adventurers that had jobs in which monsters did their bidding, like tamers, lesser mages and summoners, so it'll work out somehow. In the future, he wanted them to have enough strength to fight monsters easily, but for now, if they could carry him and run with the same speed they had when were alive, it would be enough to get out of this forest and go on a journey. They can't even defeat wild wolves and bear as they are now, let alone monsters. Just the other day, my bone goblin was broken by a living goblin. The undead that he had recently created were all very weak. Well, that was to be expected since he had a group of level 1 undead. Well then, why didn't he just create stronger undead? That reason was that he didn't know how to make undead above level 2. In his previous life, when he had awoken to the death attribute, he hadn't experienced turning anybody into undead except himself. The researchers at that facility would have never given me the chance to gather servants. When I awoke, my control over both my body and my magic had already been taken away long ago. If they hadn't done that, I would have found out about the various things they were researching, like immortal soldiers. Well, that facility ended up failing anyway. He decided to change gears and check the fighting potential of his servants. Excluding the bugs that he used for gathering information, he lined up the undead that looked like they could fight. Bone monkey, bone wolf, bone man, bone bear and bone bird. These were the ones that seemed suited the task. There were also bone boar, bone rabbit, bone goblin and so on. But the only ones who were complete, without missing or broken bones, were these 5 only. Well then, let us start the training? Wait, what should I even make them do? Vandali, who suddenly realized that he had no idea about what to make Bone Monkey and the rest do, was at a loss for words. Even amateurs had an idea about what to do when training in order to become strong. One would run to increase stamina and do strength training to increase muscle strength. One would learn the moves of martial arts or unarmed combat and then have sparring sessions to get practical experience, and so on. But what would be an effective, experience point-earning training for the undead lined up in front of Vandali? Running? It would be pointless. They have no heart or lungs, and in the first place, what would be the point in the untiring undead aiming to gain more stamina? Strength training? No, still no use. They had no muscles in the first place, having bodies solely made up of bones, so what exactly would they be trying exercise by doing push-ups and sit-ups? Unarmed combat and martial arts? Vandali didn't know any, so there was no way to teach them. Sparring? The mental capabilities of the undead were too low. If he had them fight, they would keep fighting until they were in pieces. It would just become a contest for one of them to crush the other. To begin with, Vandali himself never received any real training for fighting. On Earth, he did a moderate amount of exercise, but it was on the level of practicing judo in physical education class in middle and high school, certainly not something that could be used in a real battle. In origin, well, nothing more needed to be said. Maybe I can ask the spirits of Orbion. Those hunters know, it's impossible. Those guys knew how to use bows. And the undead didn't yet have enough mental capacity to use bows. There'd be no point in teaching them. Let's check their status for now. Though Darsa had failed to check Vandali's status when she tried, he was easily able to check the status of the undead. What had been impossible for even a parent to do was probably possible because the undead were in a subordinate relationship with Vandali. Darsa didn't know much about the jobs that let one control monsters like Tamer or Lesser Mage, or the skills related to them, so there was no way to be sure why. The status of the undead was the following: name, Bone Monkey, Bone Wolf, Bone Bear, Bone Man, Bone Bird. Rank, 1, Race, Living Bones, Level, 0, Passive Skills, Dark Vision, Active Skills, none. They're weak, too weak. The undead all belonged to the same race, regardless of what creature's bones had been used to make them, and they all had the same status. Living bones, corpses that moved despite having become only skeletons after death. They had no other special characteristics. They did move, but their movements were clumsy and their strength was far below that of an average adult male. As for agility, they weren't capable of running, their movement was slow. In addition, they couldn't use the abilities and skills that they had while they were alive. The bones themselves were hard, but it would be easy to defeat them by attacking their joints. They had almost no intelligence or instincts, and at most they would make practice dummies for apprentice adventurers. In short, they were undead that couldn't be relied on in battle. So how am I supposed to make these guys stronger? I created them 2 months ago and they're still level 0. I guess that means that they haven't done anything that would gain them experience points as living bones. Then what would gain them experience points? Swordsmen would gain experience points through battles and training, farmers through farming and weaponsmiths through forging weapons. So what would undead need to do to gain experience points? How did monsters normally gain experience points? By killing humans, maybe? It occurred to him that they would need to harm humans as monsters would do. But even if this would work, it would be difficult to do in practice. Vandali would feel no remorse no matter how many of the people of FBJ he killed, but if he killed people and then the Adventurers Guild sent out a request for him to be exterminated, he would be forced back to his underground lifestyle. He might be able to escape using the undead as a decoy, but complete skeletons of large animals like bone monkeys weren't easy to find. They weren't servants that he could use carelessly. Well, let's try killing things like rabbits and mice. Because Vandali had needed fresh blood as a replacement for his mother's milk, the undead had captured animals like rabbits in traps, but kept them alive. Vandali would then bite them with their fangs to suck out their blood. If the undead killed the animals themselves, they might be able to gain experience points. The next day, the undead successfully captured a goblin alive. High Priest Gordon's expedition had decreased their numbers, but not completely wiped them out. There was a reason the Adventurers Guild was always requesting the subjugation of goblins. Jaiji. There was no way to know whether the goblin was trying to be menacing or hurling insults at them in the goblin language, but it was shouting in an annoying voice as the undead held it down. So this is a goblin. Vandali looked at it with excitement, though his face was expressionless. It really was a fantasy world, he thought. Goblins. They were the typical small fry monsters found in numerous fantasy works, and it seemed like Lambda was no exception. It was lower-rank monster that not only lived in devil's nests that were inhabited by monsters, but also lived in normal forest and even grasslands. Its body had dark green skin with a height reaching around the chest of a grown human, and it had long ears like an elf, but its face was incomparably ugly. Its strength was about the same of an average human, if not a little less, and it wasn't particularly agile. Its mental age was the same as a 3-year-old, and it armed itself with a tree branch while using the hide of an animal to cover its body for protection. It was at rank 1 and stronger than a single of the living bones undead, but if alone, it was so weak it could be taken down by a farmer with a hoe. However, there was several superior types as well, so it was wise to be cautious. But the thing goblins were feared for the most were their reproductive capabilities and adaptability. When breeding, goblins birthed at between 3 to 8 children at once. The newly born children became full adults in 6 months. The goblins could keep on increasing in numbers regardless of if they were in the middle of a scorching desert or in the middle of winter. Oh, and there's also the setting that often occurs in fantasy works where they kidnap human women. Though apparently it's not as common as orcs doing that. He considered the knowledge Darsa had given him, but he thought it unlikely that the goblin in front of him could do that. Simply because it didn't have the strength to. For now, all of you, go ahead and deal the finishing blow together. His initial excitement was over. Now it was time to see if the undead could gain experience points or not. Jueh. Bone Monkey and Bone Man hit and kicked the screaming goblin on its head. Bone Bear and Bone Wolf bit and scratched it, while Bone Bird pecked at it. It was a gruesome method, but since the living bones couldn't finish off the goblin in one hit, it couldn't be helped. Within 10 seconds, the goblin stopped moving. Vandali checked the status of the undead. Name, Bone Monkey, Bone Wolf, Bone Bear, Bone Man, Bone Bird. Rank, 1, Race, Living Bones, Level, 2432, Passive Skills, Dark Vision, Active Skills, None. They had leveled up from level 0 to level 2. Oh, they leveled up. Now it's clear that undead can gain experience points from killing living things. Having found out that even the undead that he created using death attribute magic could gain experience points, Vandali was both relieved and elated at the same time. With this, the prospect of living as an adventurer somewhere away from the influence of a mid-empire and the Church of Alda wasn't impossible. He felt really good. I feel a little too good status. He was a little curious, so he tried checking his own status. Name, Vandali, Race, Damper, Dark Elf, Age, 8 months old, Title, None, Job, None, Level, 3, Up, Job History, None, Attributes, Vitality, 24, Mana, 100,001,203, strength, 29, agility, 4, endurance, 31, intelligence, 29, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1, rapid healing, level 2, death attribute magic, level 3, status effect resistance, level 3, magic resistance, level 1, dark vision, mental corruption, level 10, death attribute charm, level 1, active skills, blood sucking, level 2, limit break, level 2, gloom creation, level 2, curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience points independently. A surprising change had occurred. My level has gone from 0 to 3? The curse is still active, so why? In the 8 months that he spent after being born on this planet, Lambda, his level had not increased at all no matter what he did. Even when he practiced death attribute magic, or killed rabbits by sucking them dry, or even killed Orby and his partners in the same way. He checked his status again, there was no mistake. However, the unable to gain experience points independently curse was still there. Then why? As Vandali was thinking about this, an explanation came to him. Maybe, when Bone Monkey and the others gain experience points, a portion of that goes to me. On Earth, there had been games with systems where when friendly monsters or the clones of the protagonist gained experience points, the protagonist gained a portion of that. Those? Had something similar happened here? The effect of the curse just stops me from gaining experience points on my own, but gaining experience points by having the undead under me earn it for me is effective for curse a god cast on me. That's too big of a loophole. To overlook that fact that Vandali could get around the effect of the curse that had been cast in order to drive the death attribute wielding Vandali to suicide by having the undead gain experience points for him. It was such a big loophole that he thought it was some kind of trap for a moment. Rod Corty wouldn't even have to think for a second to realize that Vandali could create undead. However, the more he thought about it, the more Rod Corty seemed like a simple fool. Now that I think about it, what he is doing is basically just passing all the work to us. Giving strength and opportunities to us to everyone excluding me, and then offering no detailed instructions or following up with us afterwards. In that case, it would be natural to think that he wouldn't be able to predict something like this. It was likely that Rod Corty was viewing Vandali and Amamiya Hiroto from a place that was far above. It wasn't like a nobles and peasants relationship, it wasn't even in the same dimension. It was like the relationship between a player playing a simulation game and the player character inside the game. That was the extent of the gap between them. That was why even though he had put Vandali through such a terrible experience, he had merely thought that was wrong of me and nothing more. That was why, on top of that, to make Vandali give up on his revenge, Rod Corty thought nothing of trying to drive him to despair so that he would commit suicide. That was why Rod Corty didn't think too deeply about Vandali. To him, Vandali was just one character among 101 characters. That's why it was a curse like this. At this rate, I might be able to do something about my job too. Vandali felt delighted and invigorated, but at the same time, remembering all those things made his wrath against Rod Corty flare up again. And then he renewed his vow to never commit suicide, a vow that he had made to himself many times before. Incidentally, he went ahead and had the corpse of the goblin buried. The blood of goblins tasted bad, there were no raw materials to be gotten from it, and since he wasn't an adventurer, he couldn't collect a bounty on it, so there was no point keeping its body parts as proof of killing it. He thought about turning the corpse into undead, but thinking that increasing the numbers of bodies that needed training would be a hassle, he said goodbye to it. When the sun had completely sunk below the horizon, a bonfire could be seen burning in front of the cave in the forest. 5 undead with bluish-white flames burning in their empty eye sockets were gathered around the red fire. And then there was the child that looked like a toddler with such white skin that one would shiver at the sight of him, even in the red glow of the fire. In addition, the spirit of a beautiful, yet scarred dark elf appeared beside that toddler, as if cuddling him. If a traveler happened to come across the scene, such fear would be instilled in him that he would run away as fast as he could. The dark elf's spirit slowly opened her mouth. It was an awkward song. It was said that it was the song that the champions had sung on their birthdays long ago, and it was still sung on birthdays in Lambda to this day. Kakakakak, kashakashakasha. The undead that had nothing but bones, instead of the song began making sounds with their teeth and beaks, or their hand or feet bones in rhythm with the song. Happy first birthday, Vandali. Receiving the blessings of the spirit, the toddler breathed in, and whispering a few choice words, blew in the direction of the bonfire. Heat leech. The bonfire, which was robbed of its heat by the magic spell imbued in the breath, promptly went out. The surroundings became pitch black, but the hearts of the ones present were shining like the sun. Happy first birthday, Vandali. Your mother is really happy. Thank you, mother. The humidity of June in the country of Mage was less than that of early summer in Japan. Vandali had turned exactly 1 year old today. They were gathered here to celebrate his birthday, but he couldn't deny that it was less than glamorous compared to the birthday parties in typical households in both Earth and Origin. There was no cake and no presents. Their feast consisted of soup, with stock made from the bones of a raccoon with its meat finely minced and cooked with some spices. And, of course, the fresh blood of a raccoon. Though he had forcibly made the hard, smelly meat of the raccoon into something edible, it was in no way an excellent meal. For a damper like Vandali, it could be said that the blood was the only saving grace. I'm really sorry. If your mother was still alive, I'd have made you a proper feast. Nonetheless, Vandali was happy. There's no need to apologize, mother. I'm very happy. Vandali had lived on both Earth and Origin, but this was the first time he was experiencing someone celebrating his birthday. In Origin, no researcher would celebrate the birthday of a guinea pig. To them, it was probably nothing more than increasing the number in the age field of their data records by 1. On Earth, he had lived with his uncle's family, but was told you're going to becoming a very responsible adult in the future, so if we start celebrating your birthday or Christmas while you're a kid you'll become spoiled, and thus received no presents or cake. He had never even been congratulated once, even though the uncle did celebrate his own children's birthdays. For Vandali, this was his first birthday party. Vandali, besides, today is a very memorable day when a lot of happy things happened. Vandali said to Dasa, who had become teary-eyed and reminded her about the other memorable things that had happened. First of all, he had become able to speak properly. This was a surprisingly important thing, because by being able to speak words, he was finally able to chant the spells he was casting. Up until now, he had been unable to chant the spells, and had been forcibly activating them by using an absurd amount of mana. Therefore, each spell used mana several times more mana than it normally would, and its potency was less than half of what it would normally be. If he hadn't possessed such an abnormally huge amount of mana, he would not have been to come as far as he did. However, since he did come this far without reciting the spells at all, as soon as he was able to speak, he gained Thegent Revocation skill, which allowed him to cast spells without chanting them. Apparently, it was such a rare skill that even Dasa was shocked, although she was a little bit depressed by the timing. In addition, Bone Monkey and the other undead had reached level 100 and increased their rank to 2. Name, Bone Monkey. Name, Bone Monkey, Bone Wolf, Bone Bear, Bone Bird, rank, 2, race, Bone Animal, level, 07, passive skills, Dark Vision, active skills, none. Name, Bone Man, rank, 2, race, Skeleton, level, 4, passive skills, Dark Vision, active skills, none. As usual, there were no skills except Dark Vision, but there were great benefits that had come with increasing their rank. The overall attributes of Bone Monkey and the other undead, which had now become bone animals, had increased to match the values they had as when they were alive. In addition, they now not only obeyed Vandali's commands, but had their own intelligence of normal beasts. Bone Man was the only one that had changed into the skeleton race after the rank up, but that was a given since he was made of the bones of a human. He had the strength and agility of an average human, and from the viewpoint of adventurers it was still a small fry, but for Vandali it was a reassuring addition to his forces. If he made him wear the leather armor that he had obtained from Orbian and the other hunters and then equip him with a dagger and wooden shield that he had made by creating a wood golem, he could prepare a fine skeleton warrior. Right now, it was practicing using a bow. Incidentally, Vandali had also reached level 100. However, since it was the level 100 of non-job, his attributes did not increase that much. Although he had technically fulfilled the requirements for a job change, he didn't have access to the facilities required for a job change, namely the special rooms that could be found in various guild or temples, so it was meaningless. Finally, even though his forces had come together somewhat, Vandali thought that it was still too early to exact his revenge on Avijaya. His power was still far too little. Even now, starting and completing his revenge would be possible. But he wasn't sure that after that he would be able to run away from Avijaya and reach a place far away from the Mage country where a damp could live peacefully in a town. He must get his revenge on Avijaya and feel satisfied afterwards, so for now he was amassing power and supplies. I'm thinking of starting to hunt bandits from tomorrow. Bandits. They were not monsters, but rather armed factions of criminals that worked as robbers in the outskirts of towns. In other words, they were humans. How was the goal of amassing power and supplies related to taking the initiative to kill humans? There was very logical answer to this. Recently, no matter how many hares or raccoons the undead kill, their levels don't go up, and there are no monsters stronger than goblins in this forest. But if Mage is the center of the path that leads to other villages, and if we search for some bandits, I'm sure we'll find some. If we kill the bandits, that'll become experience points for the undead, while the supplies they have hoarded will become ours. 2 birds with 1 stone, I think. And on top of that, in this world, there was no law against killing bandits and taking their loot for yourself. On Earth and Origin, killing and taking their stolen good made you a full-fledged criminal. However, in Lambda, even if a normal citizen killed a bandit, he would not be treated as a criminal. On the contrary, you were praised as having done a good job and no one called you a killer or told you that you took away their human rights. The stolen goods were treated as the rightful property of the one who took down the bandits. If the original owner really wanted to regain his possessions, it was thought that he should independently negotiate with the one who took down the bandits. But, isn't taking down bandits dangerous? Even D-class adventurers do it in a group. Darsa spoke to Vandali, worried about him. He smiled at her reassuringly. I'll prepare a proper ambush, so it's okay. Besides, I already have an idea of where I can find some bandits. And so, from the next day, at the age of 1, Vandali began to do work by himself that even D-class adventurers did in a group. Name, Vandali, race, Damper, Dark Elf, age, 1 year old, title, none, job, none, level, 100, level up, job history, none, attributes, vitality, 34, mana, 100,001,223, strength, 32, agility, 7, stamina, 33, intelligence, 45, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1, rapid healing, level 2, death attribute magic, level 3, status effect resistance, level 3, magic resistance, level 1, dark vision, mental corruption, level 10, death attribute charm, level 2, level up. Chant revocation, new. Active skills, blood sucking, level 3, level up. Surpass limits, level 2. Glum transmutation, level 2. Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience points independently. Chapter 6. Bandits provide good leveling experience.
Okay, guys. So far, that's like 2 hours already of my work here, and the sketch is getting really fine. I did some adjustments, and I think it's really good. Uh, I just hope that after I finish the sketch, all of it will be, I will match properly with the perspective and the background. But anyways, the sketch is getting really good. I like it. Uh, it's kind of smooth. The work is going really well, and the guide, the reference guide that I'm using right now is really helping, really quickly. I'm not opening a lot of other pictures, just guides from the main character Gura. Ah, sorry. So yeah. Anyway, so this will be my avatar, my shrimp avatar here, and yeah. So she'll be holding me up over the other side. I wonder if I should give him a staff or he just hanging on Gura's hand. But I'll figure it out after finishing the sketch next time. So anyways, this will be this will be it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you would leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And next time I'll continue also with the story of the dead mage who doesn't want the fourth time. So far the story is really uh, still building up, and even though it's still building up, it's really interesting how he's starting to gather some more undead, creating them and leveling up in a loophole because of the curse that was given to him by the god. And there will be more loopholes that he will figure out in the future, and I think that you guys will like it because he will be very overpowered, and I would like to uh, yeah, get to the recent chapters because when I got to the very latest one that I think I read 2 years ago, it was really intense already. So I think when we get to the very latest chapters, it will be very very interesting, and more ideas and uh, wonderful interaction will happen. So yeah. Anyways, this is the conclusion for this sketch for today, and I hope I can do a lot more next time and more time to do the sketch. I hope that I can do it at around 3 more hours, hopefully. But let's just see. I'm pretty busy because of my work and a lot of personal stuff going on around in my house. But when the time comes that I have more time, I hope that I can deliver more. So yeah, after this, I'll take a break and I'll start streaming for Monster Hunter Rise gameplay, and hopefully later I can also try interacting with other people going online if I can finish all the um, main quests that I need to finish. If not, I I just hope that I can finish all the the main quests immediately so that I can, you know, go on to higher ranks and stuff. But yeah, so this is the end, guys. Once again, leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I hope that I'll see you again. So this is your boy Shrimp signing off. Bye bye.